we hear, yeah, it's hot in here, right? The rich man and Lazarus. It's a pretty iconic story of what wealth may lead to. And one of the challenges with this text is us. We don't want to hear it. Right? They're not going to listen to Moses and the prophets, and they're not going to listen to someone who's resurrected from the dead. Well, here we are 2,000 years later. Have the rich listened to the man who rose from the dead? No. And one of the biggest challenges for this text is that as a leader in the church, and I've done this before, I've spent hours looking at the Greek and tearing through the scripture and thinking, this cannot be what it says. You know? Never mind the fact that this text would have been read to poor peasants in Jesus' day. It seems obvious what it says, right? And I know many colleagues who have wonderful sermons on a whole bunch of stuff, but the fact remains, the rich guy goes to hell and the poor guy doesn't. And if I even want to mess with that interpretation, we have to at least look what comes before it. So this is in chapter 16 of the Gospel of Luke, right? It begins, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. We heard that one a couple weeks ago, right? The Pharisees, who were lovers of money, heard all this and they ridiculed him. So he said to them, you, those who justify yourselves in the sight of others, but God knows your hearts, for what is prized by human beings is an abomination in the sight of God. That's the next part, right? And so what I'm trying to say is this text is well situated in a context that deals specifically with money. Over and over again. The rich man is always the bad guy in this story. And there's 4 parables in chapter 16 of Luke's Gospel, and the bad guy is always the rich guy. And even I remember when I preached about the guy who was squandering the rich man's money, and people were like, wait a minute, the theme is the same. It's always the same. The rich guy goes to hell, and the poor guy goes to Abraham. Now it's interesting there, that text, it doesn't say that he was sitting by Abraham, as our text said. I can read it again if you want to hear it. And the poor man died and was carried away by the angels to be with Abraham. Does anyone have another translation of that they remember as a kid? Does that recall?
I remember it being in the bosom of Abraham.
That's exactly it.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what the text actually says. It says that Lazarus was at Abraham's bosom. That's really what it says. And for some reason or another, those who translated this, they didn't want to give us that image. Right? But think about it. You have this poor man who's literally living off the scraps of the rich man's table. He has dogs licking his sores. You get a sense that nobody even sees him. They just keep walking on by. And then he dies, and he gets the hug he's been waiting for his whole life. I like that image better. Right? Because what if that's what the text is trying to say to us? That it's not just simply we're hanging out with God. That's the biggest, most grace-filled, loving hug you've ever received. And to a poor man like Lazarus, that's got to be the greatest gift in the world. Because throughout this life, people would, as I've said before, cross to the other side of the street. Lazarus is literally one of the men and women who show up in our social hall at Operation Warm Heart from the months of December through March when we house the homes. And I don't need to remind you, but I will anyway, that the people in our social hall only end up there because they have absolutely nowhere else to go. Right? Over 500 people homeless in Union County, we have about 120 beds or so. So there's obviously not enough beds even. So I like how the text conveys to us a man hugging another man, first of all. It's not the worst in the world. Thank you for the accent ring. Ding, ding, ding. That's a beautiful image. Abraham's bosom. But I want to think about one other thing here, and this one's important. So we have, the text is obviously lambasting rich people. We've heard that every week for 3 weeks now. And that's especially prominent in Luke's Gospel. Luke's Gospel alone pretty much birthed the liberation theology movements of South and Central America, which later led to Catholic priests who were getting killed for their beliefs. Pope is from this tradition. But it speaks mostly about poverty and women's equality, more so than any other gospel. Women are leaders in Luke's Gospel, and Jesus in Luke's Gospel cares about the poor. Right? But here's the other thing. How many of you have spent your life, or at least a little bit of your life, wondering how you'll be remembered? Some heads nodding. Anyone else? Who's going to remember me? What did I do? What will it amount to? You know, where our kids carry the name, or if you don't have kids, well, our friends, or what, our work? Or maybe if you're a civil servant, you get some plaque, or maybe even a building if you're lucky, right? Something you have to. Like, who will we be? I mean, most of us in this room, if we're honest, will be forgotten. Probably all of us. Except for James. That's my little kid up there. Most of us will be forgotten. And that's the beauty of this text. Is that the rich man is forgotten. He's not named. He's nobody to God. Who's named? Lazarus. Which is to say, God knows who Lazarus is. Abraham says to the rich man, you got yours in this life, but now in the afterlife, I remember the poor. Has anyone ever heard the Bible say that before? We heard Amos, we heard Timothy today. So this week, when I was preparing for this sermon, I chose not to spend hours trying to make the text say something it doesn't. And the point of this text is not to remind us anything other than that we know what God says here. We can mess with it. We can rationalize it. We can assume plausible deniability all we want. But the rich man, when he's in Hades, he says, please send someone to tell my brothers. The point of this text is that someone is you and me. It doesn't care about Hades. That's not the point of the text. It doesn't care if there's a great chasm between Hades, or what we assume to be hell, and heaven. The point of this text is for you to say, I am one of those siblings who should let other people know that money isn't getting in the door. And that it's this life and how we live our lives today with others that matters to God. Who do you remember? Who do you forget? And when I think about this with my own kids, they know the names of like Jeff Bezos, they know all the rich people's names, but then like the local heroes, I have a hard time instilling those names in my kids even, because it's hard, right? We want to remember the rich folk. We want to remember what they're doing. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think philanthropy today, on account of the rich, is PR, and little more. And those that do it are the people that are known, but the many rich people that are out there, they don't want to be seen. And if they aren't seen, they won't be. Because they scrub Fortune 500 lists, they have PR people that work stories in opposition, when the names hit the press, they're ready to go. But the big ones, like Bezos, like Macintosh guy, Bill Gates, they can't remove themselves from the spotlight, so they do philanthropy to make us like it. That's what I believe. And I believe that because as a proportion of the income that they make, the money they give away is less than what people put on the plate on Sunday morning. There are heroes among us that nobody knows. There are people in our social hall from the months of December through March whose God is saying in this text, I know who they are, do you? And if you've been forgotten, or you're wondering if you will be, Good news. God knows your name today. God won't forget you. And this morning we're going to see a baptism of little Dylan. God's going to remember Dylan's name. God will never forget Dylan's name. Just like God won't forget any of your names. Little water, a lot of Holy Spirit. And that communicates to us the saving work of Jesus Christ. A Savior who died for people who are forgotten, who the world casts aside. And the worst part about this, in all of our narratives today, is that when we hear rich people, all of us are thinking, right? Were you all thinking that? I wrote a blog post a couple in the spring about Jesus and the rich man, and it's called Jesus and the Rich Man. You ain't rich, man. You ain't rich, man. Like that's the point of this text. If we start focusing on ourselves, and I know we can all give more, now we can all do more, but the rich people that are identified in this text aren't in this group. You'll never see them. Because if you saw it, you'd be like, how can somebody do this? How can you do this? Right? Jesus died for the forgotten. That's us. That's still